Hello, world. My name is Daniel Marnie Elkins, and this is Let's Talk About It, the Talk About It podcast, in which we share perspectives and viewpoints from around the state of Delaware and, in fact, the United States, if not the world, to bring together people who have had experiences about prevention and stories that they would like to share. And I've been joined here today by a very special guest, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and her cause and her mission.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Stack. I am the founder and CEO of Johnny's Ambassadors Youth Marijuana Prevention. We are a nonprofit based in South Denver, Colorado. And I started Johnny's Ambassadors in May of 2020 after our 19-year-old son, Johnny, sadly died by suicide after he had become psychotic and delusional from using vapes and THC wax pens, where we live in our state of Colorado, where marijuana was legalized for the first time in 2012. So Johnny's Ambassadors now works hard, Daniel, to educate teens and their parents about the possible dangers of today's high THC products, particularly in adolescent brain formation and the development of mental illnesses and, sadly, suicidal thinking.
So, first of all, thank you for sharing your mission with the rest of the world.
Yes.
It is so heartbreaking to talk to people who have experienced what your family has gone through, and from that lived experience, it is inspiring to know that you took that experience and have carried on the memory to help potentially prevent other families and parents from experiencing something like you did.
Thank you.
It is an important thing, especially for our viewers, because we work with teens, lots of teens. Yes. And it is the most common misconception that I hear these days, especially in the conversations surrounding marijuana and THC, is, first of all, they tell me that marijuana is not addictive. What are your thoughts on that?
Say if you were your age back in the 1970s, that would be more true. I used marijuana. I will share when I was 17. Now that was back in the 80s. Okay, I'm 54, so I'm a little old. But it was like Jim's basement weed. I mean, I remember about 8 of us, having a piece of paper, putting the flower in there, rolling it up into a joint, and we all shared it, one joint. And back then, when you talk about how potent the marijuana was, it was around 2% THC per gram of flower. So this was like ditchweed, like really non-potent stuff. And not that nobody ever had any problems with it, but we're sure not seeing the problems that we're seeing today in today's teens, because as the years went by and legalization marched on, the users of marijuana wanted higher and higher and higher THC content in the flower. So today, you can walk into a local dispensary and buy 20% on average THC here in Colorado, 25, 30, 35. One California dispensary we walked in had a 41% THC content. And that's just in the plant, Daniel. That doesn't even count the extracts, where now they virtually suck the THC out, which is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana that makes you feel high, tetrahydrocannabinol. And they concentrate it, and the waxes, the shatters, the vapes, the edibles, the dabs, these can be 80, 90, 99% pure, like crystal. So I would say, yeah, before it wasn't considered addictive. But in 2013, a very important year, psychiatrists around the US added it to the DSM-5, Diagnostics and Statistical Manual 5, as cannabis use disorder. It is defined as an addiction. You can Google DSM-5 CUD, cannabis use disorder, and it will actually give you 11 questions that you can rate yourself and give yourself a score so that you know whether or not, technically, according to psychiatric standards, if you would be addicted. And there are indeed cannabis withdrawal syndrome symptoms, CWS, meaning if you stop trying to use it, you're going to feel nauseous, irritable, anxious. You're going to have headaches. It's going to be hard to sleep. So with any addiction, there comes a predictable set of things that will happen to you when you try to stop using it. So you can safely cross that one off your list today. THC products are addictive.
And you highlighted a couple of very important points I just want to pull out from what you were talking about. A lot of times that the youth that we talk with don't listen to what a preventionist has to say because they don't have the lived experience. So it's really important as a part of your narrative that you literally began with, I have lived experience with this substance. But the second part is the thing that most people overlook is that we're talking about a drug that today can be up to 40 times more potent and powerful than the drug that existed for all of history.
Right.
And that's a really important thing, because this is not just, all of human history. This is as far back as there were plants and seeds that this drug existed at one level. And in the last
way back
decade,
and researchers don't know why that is, because the cannabis plant, the genus, there are drug and non-drug varieties. Like hemp is not a drug, but marijuana species, which are drug varieties, they are the only plant in the world, the cannabis genus, that interacts with our brains the way that they do. We don't know why that is, but it only partially binds to the receptor called the cannabinoid 1 receptor. And it's where our natural chemical called anandamide is supposed to bind. I want everybody listening to look up anandamide, ANANDAMIDE, anandamide. It is your body's happiness molecule. THC is like an imposter, and it fits into that same receptor where anandamide binds and kind of gunks it up and blocks it and keeps your natural anandamide from being able to get in, which decreases how much anandamide you make, and it turns off the receptors because you think you have too much. So you start to feel really bad because you don't have any anandamide, so you need more THC. So teens misunderstand the role of how THC, which has gone back for millennials in this plant, which again, we don't understand why it interacts with our receptors the way that it does. That is still a question for research. But I give school assemblies all over the US, and I have teens who come up and they say, Mrs. Stack, it's natural, God made it. It grows on the earth. Well, yeah, but not what they're doing to it today. It is commercialized, it is manufactured, it is synthesized. You can't buy any or pick any of these products off the ground. They're all made in a lab. And that's what we tell the teens. The dabs are made in a lab. Yep. So there's nothing natural about them anymore. And even if you smoked, I have some teens who say, Mrs. Stack, I don't do that dabbing stuff. I don't do that vaping stuff. I just smoke the weed, the flower. And I have to explain to them, when it crosses the 10% THC per gram of flower threshold, it is considered high potency. And guess what, Daniel? You can't buy Jim's basement weed anymore from when I was a kid. All of the plants today that are marijuana are also high potency. So that doesn't fly either. Literally every THC product today is high potency, whether you're smoking the flower, a vape, an edible, a dab, it all is genetically modified organisms, GMOs. So synthesized commercial. So that myth does not hold up either.
So it is no longer organic.
No,
it is now
no.
genetically
by the
modified.
plant.
Yeah.
But it's been modified. It's been cultivated and genetically bred to be a fundamentally different drug. It's kind of like the difference between cocaine and crack, right? Yeah. You can have one dab of shatter, like this big, one serving, and it's the equivalent of like 50 joints, 50 when I was a kid. And the teens that I talk with, and they often come up afterward, after assemblies, and they admit, you know, I think after hearing Johnny's story and hearing the research that you're sharing, I think I might have a problem, you know, and I need to get some help, because they start by just, they're at a party, right? Someone hands them a joint. They start that, they like it, they do a little more. Well, then they get tolerant of it. So now they need to use a vape. They get tolerant of that. Now they need to use a dab pen. They get tolerant of that. Right now they're into crystal. And sadly, I don't know if you know this, Daniel, but the CDC now says lifetime marijuana use is the #1 predictor that a high school teen will have abused opioids in the past 30 days. Because often they go on to use harder drugs. Not that they will, right? It's not like, oh, if you use marijuana, you're going to use other drugs. But if you talk to someone who, let's say they're shooting heroin, hey, did you just start shooting heroin one day? They'll be like, no, of course not. I started when I was a kid using marijuana, right? And so that is the brain's natural adaptation to the higher and higher and higher levels of THC. And addiction, unfortunately, happens very quickly. And with it comes a lot of mental illnesses, sadly, as well.
And that's something that I think it's worthwhile sort of delving into, because what you're describing and what most people don't realize is the fact that this is a drug that is affecting your brain and your brain over time. And that growth. It is how it is developing and evolving. And as you build a tolerance and you need to take more, it is sort of changing the perspective. And that's something that I think it's worthwhile pointing out. When you think of all of human history that people have experimented with this plant, and it goes back very, very early histories, we do not have the data of what the true effects of this potency upon the brain will ultimately be. We are only just in the last decade, in the last 20 years or so, starting to see the impact of the high potency. And it's through the stories of like what had happened to your son that we are beginning to realize that we are on the verge of a mental health epidemic, because as more and more states legalize, as it becomes easier to get access. I remember reading in the field of prevention 6 or 7 years ago, a study talking about how there had been an increase in psychotic episodes and breaks in California. And the doctors and the scientists were trying to figure out what was the correlation between these people that were experiencing a higher degree of bipolar disorder, a higher degree of manic depression, of suicidal ideation. What was the correlation? And it wasn't until they started putting together the pieces that they began to realize that the one thing that all of these people had in common was the high potency THC consumption on a regular basis.
So yeah, and there are some more recent studies.
Yeah,
we're starting to see evidence, and it's hard in the US because we don't have this coordinated effort. You know, we're not socialized medicine. There isn't one database of everybody that makes it easy to read. And most of the research out there is on the old stuff. But there is some newer research coming out that lets us start to see what's happening. It's quite concerning. We know, for example, in Colorado, that now 11 years after legalization, suicide is the number one cause of death in our youth. Ages 15 through 18, it's heart shattering. And guess what the number one substance found in their toxicology is? THC, not alcohol, not opioids, not fentanyl, not any other drug. It's THC causing suicidality. There is a direct association, and that is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. We're seeing data that come out of places like Denmark. The National Institutes of Health just reported last month in May 2023 that after 5 decades of data, last ending in 2021, over 7 million people in this socialized country having their records analyzed, that 30% of young men ages 21 to 30 would not have had schizophrenia had they not used marijuana as an adolescent. This is National Institutes of Health data. They also know in Denmark that before they introduced marijuana to that country, they had a 2% incidence of schizophrenia in the population. After that, they had an 8% incidence of schizophrenia in their population. And that's not even with, the 80, 90% stuff that we're seeing. In London, they only have skunk, right? Skunk is about 35% THC, and they estimate that skunk causes 5 times the psychosis in their population in London. And I've asked Sir Robin Murray and some of the other researchers there, what would happen if you did that research here in the States with 80, 90? And he said, I can't even fathom. It would be half of people would be psychotic because of this. So Daniel, you are right. We are on the brink of a very big problem in this country. If it takes another 60 years, like it did for tobacco before they ever said, oh, it's addictive, for them to say, wow, there is a link between marijuana use in youth and the development of mental illnesses, bipolar, schizoaffective disorder, anxiety, depression. These products are causing those. In other words, they're secondary to the marijuana use. They use the marijuana thinking it will help them, and instead they have all of these mental health problems that result. So I always point teens to the American Psychiatric Association. On their website, they state there is no current scientific evidence that marijuana is in any way, this is on their site, beneficial to the treatment of any psychiatric disorder. Contrary, evidence supports the onset of these psychiatric problems, and adolescents are particularly vulnerable given all of the neurological changes happening. Young women's brains don't stop forming till they're 25. And thanks to new research we have in 2019, young male brains continue to form until 28 to 30. And we see in MRIs, when you put marijuana in there, over a period of years, depending on how much you use it, you have a thinning in your prefrontal cortex. It literally changes the growth and the functioning of your brains. They are smaller by volume when we look at MRI studies. So teens, they need to know, look, this is the only brain you get. And even with 1 or 2 uses of THC, we see a thinning in that adult brain that is still forming. So there's no safe level of THC in that developing brain. So Daniel, this is just so critical that what you're doing is getting the education out there, raising the awareness level, sounding the alarm. I do weave Johnny's story through the assemblies that I do because I want not to scare them, but I want teens to see, look, Johnny was just like you, He thought it was just weed. He never thought he was going to have any problems. He had a 4.0 GPA and a perfect 800 out of 800 on the SAT in math. Well, it over the period of 5 years that he used it, it took him down. So we have to sound the alarm. And I'm so grateful for podcasts such as yours. And anybody out there listening, if they are concerned at all about their marijuana use, teens, give us go to our website. Parents, go to our website, johnny'sambassadors.org, where all of our education is free. We can get you support and help you figure out how you can get over this addiction if you feel you are.
So I have a tough question, and it's a question that I like to ask to sort of, put a point on where we're going with this. So you are doing the good work and you're carrying out this mission and sharing this message. How do we combat the cultural pressures that are supporting marijuana use? Because everywhere that our teens look, there are celebrities and influencers and video games and songs and music and movies that
Yeah.
are showing them that it is cool, that people who are successful do this, and that
Right.
it is a shortcut to being accepted by
Yeah.
certain groups of people. And that's
Well,
just a
yeah. I
reality.
mean, they need to know they are a pawn in the multi-billion-dollar
There it is.
machine. This is an addiction for profit industry. The marijuana industry is after our kids 100%, and they do not care. They do not care about any mental health issues. They say, oh, we don't market to kids. Meanwhile, we have all of these sugary candies and images of Cookie Monster and all kinds of ways that they are marketing to our kids. And that's because the number one demographic is 18 to 26 in terms of users. So they need 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds to get addicted so they can feed them into that pipeline.
Mm-hmm. And so the fact that you pointed out that this is a multi-billion-dollar business of addiction that is designed to bring in, that is something that is often overlooked, the money
Yeah.
behind it. And it is one of those conversations that I've had with our both our state and our federal lawmakers, is that in the prevention field, they're talking about, oh, well, we have this amount of money that's going to prevention. That amount of money that is going to prevention is the equivalent of us fighting with both our arms tied behind our back against
Exactly.
Muhammad Ali in his prime, considering how well funded they are. So it is so important to have people like you that are sharing these stories and that are doing it in such an approachable and succinct way, because fear tactics don't work.
No, we just have to continue to try to educate best we can, to get the word out, to let them know this is not medicine. This does not help your anxiety. This does not help your depression. And to get them to understand that it is changing your brain and it is just not worth it. If you have to use it, wait until you're 30. And maybe by then, maybe you won't want to. But you are your brain's BFF, and it's the only one you got. So please take care of it.
Awesome. And as a final question, because it has come up when I've talked with teens. So in states where there is not recreational yet, there is now, because of the Farm Bill being passed recently, there's been changes, and you've got this Delta 9 that is being
Delta 8.
Delta 8.
Delta 9 is marijuana. Yeah. Delta 8,
9.
Delta 10, THCO, THCA, those are all chemicals, and they are synthesized from CBD derived from hemp, which on its own is not psychoactive. But what they do is just close one of the molecules in one of the carbon chains, and they can turn it into Delta 8 THC, which is psychoactive. I tell teens, look, every time you see THC, it doesn't matter if it's Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, it doesn't matter. If it says THC, It is psychoactive, and it has the exact same effects as everything we're talking about with marijuana. So don't fall for it. It is not safe. It is 100% chemical, and it's synthesized, and God knows what's in it. Do not use it. Do not. You are putting your brain at severe risk.
We had a 14-year-old who older brother was ordering it online and giving it, saying, "Oh, it's okay, it's safe because it's not illegal." Well,
Yeah, it is illegal. They just have a loophole in the wording, being able to create these derivative products from hemp. The people who passed the Farm Bill never in a million years thought people would chemically alter the molecules from hemp to turn it into psychoactive products. So that language is currently being cleaned up, and I have every confidence that that Farm Bill will be coming out to prevent this type of thing from being able to happen. So stay tuned.
are there resources available on your website where listeners could
Yes.
get the information and be able to reach out and contact their local representatives to be educated this way?
Yes, there are so many resources. We have one sheets, we have toolkits, videos, posters, handouts. I mean, everything you want, you name it. We have it. Built-in social media campaigns. We have a suspension alternative for kids who get caught using at school. Look, we just want to educate them. We don't want to, we're not here trying to get people in trouble, right? We want people to understand why THC makes you high. Why does it harm your brain? Why don't we want you to use it? We're not out here being bad people going, don't do drugs, drugs are bad, right? There is a very important scientific study, multiple studies behind this showing why this is harmful for you. So we want to make sure that people get educated. So yes, johnnysambassadors.org, JOHNNYS, no apostrophe, ambassadors with 2 S's.org. And there's a menu there, Daniel, that says education. Everything on our website is free. That's what we do. We create resources and we give them away. So please go on there, educate yourselves, and then be an ambassador and share it with somebody else.
And make sure you go out and talk about it. So thank you so much for your time and for everything that you do and for sharing that vital information with us. And for all of you listeners and viewers out there, make sure to visit that website and talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. Take care.
Thanks, Danny.